This video is so long. This video is so long, you guys. I'm over it. Hey guys, it's Wahima, but just call me Wah.
Melanated!
Welcome to another episode of Morning Tea, where we sit in our sleepwear and discuss current events. Today's tea is Stas Premium Chai Tea Girl. I've started using like a teeth whitener and this charcoal thing that I'm gonna do a wear and review on when I'm done with it, because like I'm drinking so much tea that I know my teeth are gonna turn yellow, girl. Okay, so let's jump right into some pop culture tea. Here's the tea. Guess what 40-year-old man got a 22-year-old girl pregnant? Robin Thicke. Isn't it weird? Doesn't she look like Paula Patton? When I saw the picture, I was like, is that Paula? I thought they got divorced. But you know, I wish them all the best. So here's some sad news. Activist and comedian Dick Gregory died. He was 84 years old. Gregory is known for his activism in the 60s, for protesting the Vietnam War, for his like tongue-in-cheek and really biting, brow-raising comedy of the time. He would make jokes about segregation. You know, in a bus accident, the people sitting in the back of the bus are least likely to die. My heart and prayers as always go out to the family of Dick Gregory. Next thing is Obama's tweet. So after Charlottesville, Obama tweeted a 3-part tweet with a quote from Nelson Mandela. It broke Twitter's world record for the most liked tweet. Last I checked, it was at 4 million. It probably has gone up since then, so yay, Obama. All right, so in other pop culture news, this is very random that I found, but Elvis Presley, his legacy made $27 million in 2016. Elvis has been dead for 40 years. They still making money, son. Okay, so let's move on to some politics tea. Here's the tea. I'm gonna be honest with you, like, I don't even know what's actually happening in politics because Trump is taking up all of my life, right? Like, I'm going to try to be less Trump specific next week. God willing, he doesn't do anything that bodes talking about. So, Steve Bannon is fired. Now Steve Bannon can go back to being a private citizen who runs Breitbart News and continues to spew his nationalism rhetoric. I do not like Steve Bannon. Like, physically looking at him, like with my eyeballs, is gross because his skin is disgusting. He did make a point that I found to be valid, and I'll tell you what that is in a couple minutes. Since Trump has been in office, he's fired Michael Flynn, Sean Spicer, Reince Priebus is gone, and now Steve Bannon is gone. The only person that's left is the vice president. I love how he is just so discreetly staying out of all of the shit. He is staying as far away from the shit as possible. I can't even remember the man's name right now. It is escaping me. I feel like we can't impeach Trump because I don't want Mr. Vice President as president. What is this man's name? So Steve Bannon is out, guys. He's going back to Breitbart News. Trump wishes Steve Bannon well. You know, he said, go out there and fight the fake news, Steve. Put out your real news. Whatever that means. So anyways, President Trump has backpedaled on his sort of second apology. Is it Charlottesville? Let me Google it, because for some reason I'm feeling like I'm not saying, I think I want to say Charleston. Charlottesville. That's what it is. So Trump backpedaled on the comments he made about Charlottesville, Virginia, saying that the alt-left was there fighting as well, and both sides are to blame. And there were some very aggressive, angry people who came there without permits to fight the people who were there with permits. I mean, I don't even know what to say. I mean, it's just like, he's just so frustrating to me that I don't even know what to say. And it's so funny because I was watching footage of it, and like John Kelly, who's off to the side, is like this with his head down, and when Trump would say something that he thought was good, he was like, okay. And then when Trump would say something that he thought was like cringeworthy, he'd be like, I'm like, John, what are you gonna do, bro? What is we gonna do? He is just too much. Like, it is just so disgusting. Like, I just like, how do we get here? You know what I'm saying? Like, how did we get here? She was the wrong candidate. You know what? She was the wrong candidate. I voted for Bernie in the preliminaries, so I don't feel bad, but those of you who voted for Hillary in the preliminary, you put the wrong person up. The DNC messed that up. I'm just blaming everybody that isn't me because I didn't do it. So in his speech, backpedaling speech, Trump was talking about how, oh, what's next? Is Thomas Jefferson going to be taken down? Is George Washington going to be attacked? And I just wanted to be like, why would you jump from Robert E. Lee to like the first president of the United States of America? Like that is like so many years apart in everything that's happening. Like what? What? Those aren't even the same like thing. Like Robert E. Lee was a general in a war, and George Washington is the first president and one of the founding fathers. Like, they're not the same. They're not on the same, like, level of, like, what they have to do with the United States. So Steve Bannon called up a journalist, a liberal journalist, to have a conversation with him. You know, the journalist, he was a little like, why is Steve Bannon calling me? And this is what I think where I agree with Steve Bannon on what's happening in this country and in politics. This is what Steve Bannon said when he was asked about North Korea. He said, there is no military solution to North Korea. Forget it. Until somebody solves the part of the equation that shows me that 10 million people in Seoul don't die in the first 30 minutes from conventional weapons, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no military solution. They've got us. And that's kind of what I was saying last week, but I even forgot to mention Seoul. So obviously, North Korea is north of South Korea, right? And South Korea is our ally, so we cannot bomb North Korea. If we do anything to North Korea is going to do something to the South Koreans. And, like, we can't have that happen. Like, we can't just kill all the Koreans. So we can't do anything military about this. It needs to be diplomatic. It needs to be talked out. So until that happens, like, we can't even entertain the idea of that happening because that would be so devastating, which is why it's crazy that Trump is making the comments that he's making. This is what he said. The Democrats, the longer they talk about identity politics, I got them. I want them to talk about racism every day. If the left is focused on race and identity and we go with economic nationalism, we can crush the Democrats. Steve Bannon is basically laying out his plan. He's like, look, I'm going to let the Democrats go after socialist issues, go after identity politics, worry about not hurting people's feelings. Meanwhile, I'm going to go after the things that matter. It's economics. Point in case. Why is it important that Shea Moisture doesn't sell to white people? Why can't we just be insular within ourselves? Okay, because of money. And at the end of the day, people want to take care of their families. That's what they want to do. They want to take care of their families. So we have to find a way to bridge that gap. Let's go back in time to Bacon's Rebellion. Bacon's Rebellion was when white men decided that they needed to separate the classes, and they chose to separate them by race. There was a time when the blacks and the whites, who were all poor, got together to fight against the rich. And they were like, they lost that war, but the rich were like, we can't have this. We cannot have this. We got to divide them. So that's when they introduced the idea of what whiteness was. Being white in this country was developed in order to keep the races fighting so that the poor didn't rise up to attack the rich. I'm on a soapbox now. I'm gonna get off. Just food for thought. Look up Bacon's Rebellion. I saw this video on Twitter of Jay-Z on a podcast talking about propelling the culture forward. I mean, if you guys have listened to his album, you know that he talks about legacy and building up the community, the black community specifically. But he even has the song where he talks about he could have bought property in Dumbo for $1 million, and now he feels like a Dumbo because 10 years later it's worth $25 million. Black people are powerful, and I've said this before, because black people drive culture. We are culture right now, and it is pushing America forward. And it has been since the late 80s. And sometimes it's to our detriment, because I do think consumerism in the black community is way higher than almost any other community. And so therefore it's kind of puts us back into this cycle of staying poor. But that's a whole other conversation. He was talking about how people came at Jordan for leaving Nike. You know, people are mad at LeVar Ball for trying to make his own company and have his own shoes, and people are criticizing it. And like I've said in that episode when I talked about LeVar Ball, it's like, yeah, he might be going about it the wrong way, but I have to support his entrepreneurship. Like, I have to support that, because I think that in 50, in 100 years, black people could really change the face of our current struggles in this country if we attempt to move up in the food chain in a way that's not social with race, but with class. The more money we have out there and the more money we pump into our own communities and cultivate ourselves, the better America as a whole gets, because we're pushing an agenda to have Americans do better and be better in this country. As descendants of slaves in this country brought here as manual labor and beaten and raped and torn apart and segregated and all the horrible things that have happened to Black Americans in this country, we have an opportunity to turn it on its head in a relatively fast turnaround time. Because if you think about it, slavery was not that long ago, and we've come a long way since then. We've got a long way to go, but I strongly believe that economic stability and entrepreneurship is what's going to propel us forward. You gotta want the next generation to do better. We gotta promote that. Because yes, $1 million is great, but $25 million is better. And you know what's better than $25 million? $50 million. It's not gonna happen tomorrow, but it could happen in 50 or 100 years. Let's move on to some domestic tea. Here's the tea. Girl, ESPN in this auction. So there was a skit on ESPN that was supposed to be funny about the way you choose your team for Final Fantasy football, or fantasy football. Right, fantasy football. And one of the ways is an auction. They had this skit where they had men, mostly white, sitting down, and they had an auctioneer using paddles with players' faces on them, showing like, how much do you bid for this player, how much do you bid for that player. I mean, how could they not know? I mean, that is where you are in your privilege when someone is like, I know, let's do an auction. We know that majority of the NFL is Black, but that doesn't matter. We'll throw, there's some white people too, so no one's gonna think back to slavery. Key and Peele got away with it because they're Black. I don't know why ESPN thought they could get away with it. So, speaking of sports and football, Colin Kaepernick, he has not got picked up by any NFL teams this season. He, after being with the 49ers, he did not renew his contract with the 49ers, and so now no other team is picking him up. So there are a few groups, NAACP, NYPD officers, and there's this hashtag Blackout NFL in support of Colin Kaepernick. Now, the idea of them supporting him is like really heartfelt for me. Like, I think it's a great idea. However, I'm a little like, it's weird that you're protesting this one millionaire to get his job back. Like, I kind of think that Colin will be okay. Maybe you don't have to like protest for him to get his job back. You know what I'm saying? Like, if it was like 5 players that this happened to, like, I would be like, okay, yeah. But like one guy, like, okay, I guess I just don't know about sports enough and I don't care about football enough to be like, yeah, this is great. It's a great movement. Because I just feel like, okay. Let's move on to some international tea. Here's the tea. So there was mudslides in Sierra Leone. The government called for 10,000 people to be evacuated. Every day, they say that it is going to be harder and harder to find people with every day that goes by. Could you imagine 10,000 people being forced from their homes due to mudslides? And when they get back to their homes, like, how are they going to rebuild? That's so sad. Okay, so Barcelona, there was a terrorist attack in Barcelona, and in one instance, 13 people died. So what happened is there were 2 different terror attacks in Barcelona. There's kind of a third one as well. So on Thursday afternoon, around 4:50 p.m., a white van smashed into people in Las Ramblas. It's like a famous street in Barcelona where a lot of tourists are. And the driver zigzagged his car trying to hit as many people as possible in a pedestrian area. He killed 13 people and injured more than 100. And then there was a similar incident that happened in another part of Barcelona where a driver did drive erratically and kill some, like, I think he only killed 1 person at this time. Only 1 person died in that one. Still horrible. And then in another part of Barcelona, Alcanar, there was a house that blew up, and there were a bunch of canisters of like butane and propane, and they think that was something that stopped another attack from happening. The fact that the house blew up, only 3 people died in that, and those 3 people who died in that house blowing up were believed to be the people who were in the house hoarding the propane and butane. So, I mean, these extremist cells are everywhere, and to me it's weird. Like, why are they driving and killing people. Like, why? I just don't understand, like, what the point of going into, because the London Bridge was the same thing. Like, I don't understand what is the ideology behind going to tourist populated areas and just ramming their cars into people. Like, what are they doing? What are they proving? What are they showing? Could it be that the CIA is really, like, actively in all, maybe other government spy groups from different governments around the world are actually thwarting, you know, ISIS from actually doing terror attacks that are like on a grander scale? Why are the targets regular people and not like government buildings and such? Like, I'm just, you know, I'm not saying that's a suggestion, but I'm just wondering what the point is of this. And they're destructive, you know, to people who have no control over Western culture. They're just people who are trying to live their everyday lives. Why do they attack pedestrians? Why do they attack regular people in the Middle East and outside of the Middle East? I don't get it. I hope that life gets back to normal as soon as possible for you guys. Last but not least, in international news, the First Lady of Zimbabwe is under some heat. First Lady was in South Africa visiting her son who lives there. She gets to his hotel room and then there's this 20-year-old model there and she's like, and she allegedly got an extension cord and attacked this young woman and popped her in her forehead and caused a deep gash in her forehead using the extension cord. And so when the girl reported it to the police, the South African police put on red alerts around the borders and airlines so that the First Lady of Zimbabwe couldn't leave. But then officials in South Africa gave her immunity. You know, she's an official traveling to their country. South African newspapers and officials are upset with the fact that Grace Mugabe was given immunity and allowed to get on a plane and go back to Zimbabwe. Like, what? But there's some other tea about Grace Mugabe. So Grace Mugabe's husband, who's the president of Zimbabwe, is 93 years old. Grace is 52 years old. Grace is also trying to get a policy that was once in the Zimbabwean constitution regarding a woman being vice president put back in so that she could be, so allegedly she wants to be either president or vice president. She's got plans for herself. She's criticized because she spends a lot of money, she's arrogant and decadent and kind of does whatever she wants to do. And so, like, you know, right now she's like, mum's the word. She's back in Zimbabwe living her life. Instagram model Gabriella Ingalls has now got a gash on her forehead. Apparently she's in South Africa living in fear. Listen what I'm saying. I'm trying to think of a scenario in which I'm in a hotel room with the first son and his mom comes through and I don't immediately grab all my clothes and run out. I'm trying to think of that scenario in which, like, she has time to grab an extension cord to beat me up. I mean, maybe she had her bodyguards hold Gabriella down, but that's some serious business if that's what happened. Or maybe Gabriella was like, I'm not leaving. I don't know what happened, girl, but she got her face popped. And I'm like, you don't mess with Mama Grace. She over there beating 20-year-olds up. All right, you guys, that's the end of this episode of Morning Tea. If you would like to join the conversations, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please leave them down below. If you like what I do here on this channel and you would like to become a Patreon patron, please feel free to go to my Patreon and become a patron. You can give as little as $1 a month. It would be absolutely much appreciated. If you have any questions about the pillows that are behind me, that'll be linked down below as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bye. Girl, you guys do not like Omarosa. I didn't realize that y'all are like, no, Omarosa's canceled. Everybody was mad at Omarosa. Listen, I still stand by my position. But I feel you.